We look at Darth Maul and see a monster, a Sith assassin, a criminal kingpin, a man obsessed with revenge and power. But when you look closer at the life he built after Naboo, a different picture starts to form. Because Darth Maul didn't build an empire because he wanted to rule the galaxy. He built it because he was terrified of being alone. And once you realize that, everything about Maul starts to look different. To understand the Shadow Collective, you have to understand what Sidious took from Maul first. We talk about the Sith as teachers, but that's not what happened on the ruins of Malachor. In the 2017 Age of Republic comics, there's a scene that defines every single breath Maul would ever take. Palpatine takes Maul to the site where thousands of Sith and Jedi died in a single instant during the Great Scourge. It's a graveyard of statues, flash-frozen warriors caught in the middle of a scream, their bodies turned to carbon and stone. The air here doesn't move. It's heavy with the static of a billion ended lives. Sidious doesn't give his apprentice a lightsaber. He doesn't teach him how to tap into the Force. Instead, he commands Maul to reach down, and he watches as Maul scoops up a handful of the gray, gritty dust from the ground and forces Maul to inhale it, to breathe in the literal, physical ashes of the dead. Imagine the feeling of that. It's coarse and gritty. It clogs your throat and settles in your lungs like a permanent physical weight. Every word Maul would ever speak for the rest of his life would be pushed past the dust of people who weren't strong enough to survive. In that moment, Sidious didn't just train a student, he erased a child. He taught Maul that the only thing that matters in the universe is power, and the only thing power produces is more death. He replaced a name with a title, a personality with a weapon, and a heart with a singular burning purpose, to be a blade in another man's hand. He taught him that his only value was his utility. If he wasn't killing for his master, he didn't exist. He was a weapon, and the only thing a weapon knows how to do is find a hand to hold it. And then at Naboo, the hand let go. Imagine that fall. We focus on the physical trauma of being cut in half, but the psychological trauma was worse. Maul fell into that pit not as a person, but as a discarded tool. He spent a decade in the literal trash of the galaxy on Lotho Minor. He wasn't just surviving, he was knitting himself back together with the garbage of 1,000 civilizations. There is a sound to that decade. It's the sound of metal scraping on metal. It's the smell of ozone and rot. He was using junk and scrap and a hatred so pure it replaced his need for food or water. He built those spider legs not out of a desire to walk, but out of a refusal to stop being a weapon. But when he finally crawled out of that hole, he didn't have a soul left to go back to. He only had the habits of the monster who created him. He was a weapon that had been broken and then glued back together, and he was desperately looking for a new hand to tell him where to strike. This brings us to how Maul built his own empire. Look at how he treats Kira in Crimson Climb. Most fans see a mentor and a protege, but if you look closely, you see a man who is desperately, clumsily impersonating his abuser. He doesn't offer Kira a partnership, he offers her a survival manual that reads like a suicide note. In the book, Maul forces Kira to frame her own friends. He forces her to sacrifice her own crew, just to prove she's loyal. He tells her that the only way to exist is to suppress every emotion and to weaponize every vulnerability. He tells her that connection is a weakness to be exploited. He's trying to teach her how to breathe in the ashes, just like he had to. He wasn't escaping Sidious, he was reproducing him. He used the exact same levers to ensure that Kira would never be able to leave. He was tattooing the Crimson Dawn symbol onto Kira's skin because he didn't know how to connect with a human being any other way. He didn't know how to build a family, so he built a syndicate. He didn't know how to be a brother, so he became a master. He thought that if he could make Kira as broken as he was, then maybe he wouldn't be the only one suffering in the dark. He was building a throne out of the very chains that Sidious used to bind him on Malachor. He was a weapon, looking for a hand, and when he couldn't find one, he tried to become the hand itself, but he only knew how to grip. He didn't know how to hold. And eventually, the person Maul was trying hardest to imitate came back. When Sidious arrives in Season 5 of the Clone Wars, he doesn't just win a duel. He performs a psychological eviction. He kills Savage Opress, the only person in the entire galaxy who actually loved Maul for who he was, not for what he could do. Look at the scene. It's not a political struggle, it's a massacre. Maul isn't fighting for a throne anymore. When Savage falls, Maul's entire world collapses. He's screaming, he's crawling on his hands and knees towards his brother. He's watching the only real attachment he has left bleed out on a cold, indifferent floor. And then, the silence hits. It's a silence that Sidious fills with laughter. He laughs because he sees that Maul is still playing his game. Even with a crown and the darksaber, even with an army of Mandalorians at his back, Maul is still just a dog begging for attention by showing off the empire he built with his master's tools. "You have become a rival," Sidious tells him, but what he really means is, "You have become exactly what I designed you to be." Sidious didn't kill Maul that day because he didn't need to. He had already won. He had proven that even when Maul tried to build something of his own, it was still just a satellite orbiting the Sith sun. He had proven that Maul's empire was just a playground for the trauma Sidious had gifted him. Maul was a man who had built a kingdom out of his own agony, and Sidious just walked in and turned the lights out. Now, we have to look at the moment Maul's architecture finally collapsed. After the Empire rose and the Shadow Collective began to fray, Maul didn't just go into hiding. He went looking for a way to stop feeling small. In the story The Ghosts of Maul, we find him on the desolate world of Demonos. It's a place of jagged black rock and a silence so deep it feels like it's pressing against your eardrums. He's hunting for an ancient Sith castle, convinced that inside its walls is a secret power, a weapon or a ritual that will finally give him the strength to balance the scales against Sidious. But Demonos isn't a planet, it's a mirror. As Maul walks through that castle, the stone walls don't just hold shadows, they hold his failures. He isn't alone. He's surrounded by the ghosts of the people he couldn't save and the monsters who made him. He sees Savage Opress, his brother, standing there with that same look of agonizing betrayal he had when he died. Maul tries to strike, tries to fight his way through the vision, but as he lunges at Savage, the face in the darkness changes. He isn't looking at his brother, he's looking at himself. He issues a scream from the very center of his soul. Every lightsaber duel, every political assassination, every empire he built, none of it was about ruling. It was about noise. He was trying to build enough noise and enough structure to drown out the voice that told him he was still just a discarded tool in the trash heap of the galaxy. He confronts the ghost of General Grievous, the man who took his mother from him, and he realizes that even knowing Grievous is dead brings him no peace. He confronts Qui-Gon Jinn, who offers him a choice to free himself from the prison of his own making, and Maul chooses the fire instead. He finally reaches the inner sanctum of the castle. He breaks down the final door, expecting to find the dark power that will save him. But when the dust clears, there's nothing there. The room is empty. There is no secret. There is no weapon. There is only a hollow stone chamber and the sound of his own heavy breathing. Maul spent 30 years building hollow iron towers just to prove to a former master that he wasn't broken. But standing in that empty room on Demonos, the truth finally settles in. The wind just keeps blowing, and he is alone. This is the version of Maul that arrives on Tatooine. He isn't a warrior looking for a fight. He's a ghost looking for an end, a man who has realized that the cycle of inherited agony only has one exit. We call Tatooine a desert, but in the final moments of Maul's life, it isn't a desert. It is a stillness. It is the kind of silence you only find when the wind stops and the heat becomes a physical weight on your shoulders. Maul ended his life as a ghost, still talking about hope and revenge, still obsessed with a man who had cut him in half 30 years prior. But look at how it ends. This is where we've been misreading the story for years. He doesn't die screaming, he doesn't die in hate. He dies in the arms of Obi-Wan Kenobi. Think about the stillness of that scene. The heat and the sand and the weight of two old men who have spent their entire lives being defined by a war they didn't start. Maul asks if the boy Obi-Wan is protecting is the chosen one. And when Obi-Wan says he is, Maul's final words are, "He will avenge us." But the real tragedy isn't the revenge, it's the word us. In that final moment, Maul finally found the connection he'd been looking for his entire life. He found it in the man who had defeated him. He found it in the only other person in the galaxy who understood what it meant to lose everything to the Sith. He finally found a hand to hold him, but it wasn't the hand of a master. It was the hand of a witness. Obi-Wan didn't just hold him, he acknowledged him. And that's something Sidious never did. Sidious gave him a title, he gave him a mission and a lightsaber, but he never gave him acknowledgement. He never looked at Maul and saw a person. He only saw a function. Obi-Wan saw the person. In that final embrace, the Shadow Lord finally stepped out of the dark. He wasn't a king, and he wasn't a Sith. He was just a man who had finally stopped fighting.